Hey guys, it's Mike from Shamino's Workshop. Today I have a video for a Roman Props Inception Elite. That just timed out on me. Idle timeout works. Yeah, this has been installed finally. I've had this for a while. Thank you for your patience. This is a customer commission that I've had probably since October. It's got Goth Master Chassis, crystal reveal, so we got metal crystal chamber going on. It's a saying, labor of love. It's a beautiful piece, but sometimes working with the Master Chassis, not just this one, across many of the sabers, right? There's a lot of complexity to them, limited space, a lot of detail. And you kind of want to get it just right. So a lot of time went into this one, but I have it sitting on 3 stands only to show the different reveals. Right, it's a dual reveal, so you have a crystal chamber here with 2 crystals. You have your your soundboard area with recharge port, and there's a on-off switch down here, but got an accent ring and some accent LEDs, which we'll see when we turn it on. So let's put it back together, and then this way we can show it off a little bit. Oop. So there's gesture activation working. Let me zoom out. Had it zoomed in a bit. Okay. I do have the blade plug in. We're using stock NeoPixel connectors and has the pogo pins. We're also using a modified heatsink to hold the Shtok PCB. So on the inside top, I just add some electrical tape, Captain tape, just something to ensure that those pogo pins won't contact metal and conduct and short out. So you can put that in and you get your blade retention. For now, I'm just going to take it out. Eventually we'll put a blade in there. In the control box, we're using the Shtok. So this is a second run. The third run changes this control box, and I won't be able to use this specific switch holder going forward. But this one's really nice because it sits perfectly in the control box. It has some of these, I don't know what you call this mechanism, but basically, some sort of rocker mechanism so that it puts pressure on the clamp card.
So uncivilized.
Whoops. To avoid that from happening, right? That's the auxiliary button, so it's just...
So uncivilized. Only a Sith.
There's a number of Obi-Wan Kenobi fonts on here.
I am Pre-Vizsla.
Pre-Vizsla.
We are the Death Watch. Descendants of the... Only a Sith.
Okay, so that should be the first font.
I will do what I must.
So now that it's on, right, we can open it up. That's the gesture ignition. I have to always remember not to twist that way, it'll turn it on. So here's your reveal. We have 2 crystals independently controlled. They're currently just pulsing while the saber's off. But there's basically a 50-50 LED behind each one. They run in series up until the blade connector as well. So we have a custom saber shop PCB, which hooks up to a blade side in there. And that allows us to do a full crystal reveal by removing the grenade section. Alternatively, you could run wires. But in that case, that's a lot of wire slack that you're going to have to deal with. And for me, it was just easier to not deal with it. So here we have a PCB held in place by the top part of this piece. So this piece comes with the Goth Master chassis. I have a spare here. This piece actually comes attached like that. So you have to just snip it off. And then the piece actually can be cut again. You can see the 4 white dots. You can cut the piece again so that you have a hilt side connector and a blade side connector. Which I would suggest doing even if you're going to wire and not use pogo connectors here. Even if you're just going to hardwire it, I would still cut that off because that's going to save you a good amount of room to hide wires up on top for wire slack. Yeah, so you have a custom saber shop, again running in series with the Shtok PCB, and then this is set up in V2 or V3, I forget, the in-series mode or option, so that the 5 pixels here run in series with the blade and with the 2 crystal chambers. So technically it's 1 blade, 2 blades, and then the main blade is a 3rd blade. Now you might say, you know, here we're using the blade plug that comes, which doesn't offer any reveal. But that's not to say that you couldn't swap out the blade plug for something that does reveal. So I opt to go for this one anyway. Come on. I opt to go for using the short pin Shtok because it helps with the blade also. Because I know what that height is. I have a holder. Okay. So enough said. So that's the crystal reveal. Okay, and then down here on the lower, I just have a pixel strip right there with a slope turbine that moves to a fast turbine. 2.1 recharge port. It's a ProffieBoard, not Plector install, so we don't use the rice port. And then we have a kill switch, on-off switch. The ProffieBoard, or any board used, would be concealed with the cover. But I had to modify the cover just a little. And I also modified, I got rid of the Mac, Goth's term for multi-adaptive chassis, I believe is what it's called. But essentially, with a lot of Goth chassis, you have that Mac, which supports ProffieBoard, Prism, Nano, Biscotti, right? It supports a number of boards, and you just snip parts of the holder away so that you fit your board. The problem though is the default for the Proffie, I don't feel it lines up well. It's centered, which means the USB is centered, and it interferes with the rods. It's also pushed forward, making it more complicated to access the SD card and the USB, because right here is essentially the battery. So I get rid of Mac. At least on this install, I snip all of the Mac pieces away, and I created my own holder. Essentially 3D printed something that fills up the void here, pushing the ProffieBoard to that side, getting out of the way of the rod that holds the cover on. And there's also meant to be 2 rods just to support this better. But again, the issue is if I put a second rod here, it's going to make it very difficult to access this USB. So what I wind up doing is snipping the material that holds the second rod. I snip that off. It's actually still on. Let's see if there's flashlight. So like right here where my finger's pointing, I snip that off because it's not needed. The cover is secure enough without it. And then essentially I glue my holder piece on this edge, and that gives me the perfect spot to put the ProffieBoard, E6000, the holder, as well as the ProffieBoard once everything's wired and tested. E6000, because E6000 bonds very well. It's a very strong bond, but it's also very easy to remove. So E6, whenever I have to glue or adhere my boards to a chassis, E6000 is the way. Because surprisingly, it's not difficult to remove that. Little bit of a razor, just in between the ProffieBoard and the chassis, very slowly, just kind of break the seal, and then with like a plastic tool, you can just kind of lift up a corner of the ProffieBoard. Never try to lift it up by the USB, and you'll see it's kind of boogerish or kind of gummish once it's cured. Yeah, okay, so that gives us access to the USB and the SD card. Now you'll notice it's set back a bit, and it's set back a bit, which coincidentally helps us. It's set back a bit because of the PCB connector and how I set it up. Also, this copper piece, which screws in, it actually recesses into the grenade section quite a bit, 1/4 inch maybe. Coincidentally, about a 1/4 inch. So others will grind that metal down and away in order to close that gap. But I didn't, and I'm kind of glad I didn't, because now with a top angled USB adapter, you could get your USB adapter connected without having to undo this screw and pulling the chassis down. Which, you know, the less you have to move, the less you'll put strain on the wires, because they're all wires running up to the switch box. And I do have a JST connector buried up in here that, you know, would make disassembling that easier. Just for future maintenance, right? Just trying to think of the future. But, you know, coincidentally that worked out. Now I could have tried to do the same thing, grinding away some of that material, giving me maybe that 1/4 inch where I could push that in. But then every time I need to access the SD card or USB, I got to turn the screw, pull the chassis out to get enough clearance. And, you know, we were comfortable. We both agreed, you know, that we're comfortable with that little bit of space here. Even a right-angled adapter you could use, but the top-angled adapter is actually a lot better here. The right-angle adapter, you can see that USB slot actually is almost flush with the top of the chassis. So even a right-angled adapter, I looked into magnetic USB adapters where you just put a small piece, a micro USB adapter in that has sort of a magnetic connector, but this material kind of gets in the way and you don't get a good, actually burned out a ProffieBoard in testing that setup. So I said, screw it. If there's a chance, if I'm going to screw it up, there's a chance everybody else is going to screw it up. And it's just not practical here. If this was a bigger hole, then what I could have done was just ran like a remote connector here. And then you would just plug in here and never have to really deal with this area. Just keep the cover on. But maybe I'll experiment on my install when I eventually get to it. Now I have the latest run, which changes that control box, so I can't use that Shtok switch holder in here on mine due to the changes that were made. Okay, there we go. All right, let's turn it on. So again, the strip will pulse, the grenade section will pulse. I'm sorry, this is slow turbine, crystal will pulse. And then there's 4 blue accent LEDs here, 3 mil, that will turn on. It's not blade mirroring, but essentially the 4, because you run out of LED pads on the ProffieBoard. These 4 accents are essentially acting as a blade. So altogether there's 5 blades. which makes each preset have 5 blade styles. Okay. So with that said, we'll turn it on. Right, we can see there's our accent LEDs. They're just on statically, but the strip, which is now fast turbine, you can see that has some effects. So we can close that. If we look at the reveal again, right, that'll also mimic blade, as does the Shtok PCB, mimics blade. And because they're all run in series, I can use sub-blades and control them independently, as opposed to this running in parallel, and doing these 5 LEDs would do whatever the first 5 pixels in the blade do, which is generally not much. So I always try to opt for in series when I can, using sub-blades, and that gives me the flexibility to basically do what I want to do with those. There's gesture, gestures are turned on. My customer has always provided configs, pretty much pre-configured to his liking. He uses across his sabers. So he provides me the fonts, the config file, and then I just make the tweaks to the config file based on the install. Right, in this case, for example, his config had 3 blade styles, so for 3 blades, but as we got into it, I added the strip. I have the crystal reveal. So his blades were crystal reveal, Shtok, and main blade, but then I went and added the strip and the accent LEDs, so that adds 2 more. So each style had to be updated. Some of the defines, I added idle timeout. I'm forgetting. But he always, I get my point is, he always gives me a good config file to start with, and then I just tweak as needed. Yeah, you know what? Let's throw the blade in. So custom blade, right? With Roman sabers, he always uses these heat sinks, which, let me talk about that as well. The heatsink that comes with this saber in the kit, it's nice, it works, but it sits out of the emitter. It would sit like that. And the problem with that is making a custom blade like this. They're screwed, right? You can see the recess, because the idea is that the blade would wrap around the heatsink. And this being too tall forces the screws up out of the emitter, and then you'll see them, right? So you'll see those screws. So there's a shop, Bespin, and I'm sorry, I'll fix it in the description, but I think it's Bespin Custom Sabers, perhaps. He makes replacement heat sinks and blade plugs for the Inception and the MK1, I believe, that reduce the height significantly, right? You can see how much further down it sets. And that's perfect for NeoPixel setup, because now I can put my blade in and I can hide those screws, right? You can see, you won't see those screws. Oops. So it's a 32-inch blade, 112 pixels. Lightning effects.
Sith Lords are our specialty. Don't try it!
And you know, the nice thing about the grenade, right, is the whole thing comes right off. Even while it's running. You put this back in. It resets the connection. So that's pretty cool. It has the gesture activation, so a swing will turn it on, a twist will turn it off, and it has some of the other gestures.
So uncivilized. Hello there. This is General If you're not with
So these are all blue.
I see through the lies of Master Windu.
So there's a purple. Hopefully that comes across okay. Yeah, maybe further back you can kind of see that purple.
General Mundy reporting for duty. I don't believe in chance, Commander. Those who have power should restrict.
Green.
The time has come.
Is that red? No. That must be Bad Annie.
There are ways those who have passed on still guide.
So that's green, green, yellow for Ahsoka. I think that's,
Hello, Master.
yeah, green and then blue. There's red.
Don't insult me.
Skip past the reds.
General Krell. I will not be undermined by Crimson Dawn. Anakin Skywalker. Darth Vader. The balance.
There's an unstable blue.
Jedi, prepare for death.
And that's your Electro Blade.
You will fall, I am Pre Vizsla. We are the Death Watch. Descendants of the true warrior faith all Mandalorians once knew.
Shouldn't have to tell anybody what that is.
Only a Sith
And
deals
then we're back to the beginning.
I'll do what I must.
Okay. Put that back there. The other thing, and we can show this, let's talk about the screw that holds the chassis. So this is chassis retention. And if I take the screw out, that's where, you know, that's holding the chassis in place. It keeps it from rotating as well as back and forth movement. And the idea is, if we look at it, you have this groove, which is this screw is kind of fitting into, and then you have this area which this screw is meant to press up against. But I found that just pressing up, due to the length of the screw, it's really not sufficient. A little tug on that, and it drops out of place. And this screw's also not long enough to sit in that groove, so you still get movement. And that was annoying. And so in the Goth instructions, he suggests adding some material to the screw to lengthen it, which is what I wind up doing. Others might actually center drill and add some material that way, center drilling the screw and adding some metal or like a rod. I basically took mesh, the same mesh, I don't know if you can see it, but I hide this with some mesh. So I took some mesh, I folded it, I glued it, I pressed it, and then I glued it onto the end of the screw and sanded it so that it would fit in the hole. But I don't want to pull this out too much. You can see there's a hole. So for me, what I do is I drill that hole and tap it so that the screw has a place to recess into, and it really gives it a better bond. So now I need to, let me shut that off while I'm futzing around. Okay. So I look through the hole, I find the chassis hole, and then as you screw it in, you can really feel the bond. That's real secure, nice and tight. You can actually feel it. If you hold it as you screw it or unscrew it, you'll feel that chassis really tighten and kind of get sucked in. You know you got a good strong bond there. The chassis also comes with a kill key, but it's too big. It doesn't actually, it fits in there, but you can't close it. So you got to wind up modifying the kill key. It's really not necessary because you have the on-off switch, so you can really just use that for charging, as the kill switch will kill power to the board. So that you don't have to worry about dropping a kill key in there. Now, with that said, the way that I do my installs, and maybe many others do their installs, the battery positive I have going directly from recharge port to kill switch to ProffieBoard, so that's how power gets killed. But I also have power going to the NeoPixels, and down here, those are also running right off the bat. So there's positive connections going to the various components, but since the kill switch is in between the recharge port and the ProffieBoard, the ProffieBoard's not receiving power, or I mean, yeah, it's not receiving that closed circuit loop, right? So there's no negative coming up here or to the chamber or to these, but there is positive, right? There are some electrons. And so if I'm going to open this and do work, I'll toss a kill key in there just to ensure that there's no current flowing anywhere. But in normal usage, you don't need to kill it. You just turn it off, and that's good enough. ProffieBoard also has the idle timeout configured, so after 5 minutes, power's killed in the event you forget to shut it off. Yeah. I did sand the CoverTech screw on the inside a bit so that it doesn't interfere with the chassis. Yeah. And then the only other thing, some of these areas are fingerprint magnets, so nice fresh microfiber cloth. Can be used to get rid of fingerprints or oils from your hands, because it just attracts it. I'm always fearful of using like IPA wipes or any strong chemical, because I don't know what type of finish. Is this been just polished, or is there an actual some sort of coating on the metal? And I don't want to use a chemical that would potentially interfere with that chemical, with that sealant, right? Okay. So you could do this with gloves on, give it a nice wiping, and then put it on your stand. Hey guys, sorry about the edit there. I apparently hit my cameras. I don't know if it's a max file size or duration, but this camera automatically shuts off and doesn't really give you a warning. It would be nice if it beeped or did something, but anyway, I'm at the end of the video. Just wanted to, you know, wrap up. Say thank you for watching. If you have any comments, any feedback, any questions, feel free to ask. Let me know. Otherwise, thanks for watching, guys.